Begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. On behalf of McNally Robinson, and with thanks to Sans Press, I would like to welcome you to the launch of Hiding Scars by Richard Zarek. Richard has had a passion for writing as far back as high school. He earned a business degree from the University of Manitoba and has been a researcher for over 25 years. Hiding Scars is his first novel. To tell us more, please join me in welcoming Richard Zarek.
Wow, look at that. I don't know where to start. I've got all these notes and everything. I'm so prepared, but as usual, I don't know how. But the one thing I have to be thankful for, more than anything, is the fact there's no Jet game tonight. Last night, I looked at it, I was praying for two things. One was, okay, please, Jets win. Please win. And then please, when they do win, make the schedule just so it lines up, and look at that. And it didn't even rain today. That's another wonderful thing too. So it's all turning out. So what I'm going to do here is, obviously I'll do a reading and then the signing. Of course, there's a lot of things, a lot of people that I'm thankful for that I'll get to. But before that, I thought I'd have a little bit of fun. And over the last few days, what I did is I thought a little bit about, I was thinking a little bit about David Letterman, actually. He's a big fan of mine. I've always liked him. He's got this new show on Netflix. I haven't seen it yet, but I remember back in the day, 67 years ago, back in the 80s or whatever, when he used to have his regular late night show, and every so often he'd have a top 10 list. So I have a top 10 list here of You Know You're a Writer When. You Know You're a Writer When. Well, actually, before I even get into that, the funny thing about David Letterman, Paul Schaefer, remember him? He was their musical guy. He was the guy, he's kind of like me, kind of bald, glasses. I can't play the piano, but he played the piano. And he was sort of his sidekick, and they'd kind of kibitz and joke around. One thing I was thinking about for this launch and this signing is, wouldn't it be bad if you said something and nobody showed up? That's not the case here. And I thought back to him because he was in a movie called Spinal Tap. And in that particular movie, if you've ever seen it, if you're older than 30, let's say, there's a scene where the band is at this launch for one of their LPs, one of their records, and there's nobody. There's nobody there, and one guy's blowing his nose, and he plays the role of, Paul Schaefer plays the role of Artie Fufkin. Funny name. And he's so embarrassed because he's this, he's with the label, he's with Polymore or whoever is working with Spinal Tap, and all he says is, you know what, you guys just kick me in the ass. Kick me in the ass right now, I deserve it because there's nobody here. Well, you know what, nobody's getting kicked in the ass tonight. It's a great turnout, so thanks everybody for coming. All right, 10, these are the top, this is a poll, I'm a researcher here, top 10 reasons where you know you're a writer when. So number 10, you honestly fret over commas, semicolons, and other forms of punctuation. Number 9, you get up at 5 in the morning, not because you have to, but because you want to. Number 9. Number 8, you feel great and it makes your day when you get a creative and encouraging rejection note. And that's true. Number 7, you consult with other writers regarding the correct use of lie and lay, and lie awake in bed thinking about it. Or is it lay awake in bed? Number 6, it bugs you when the last letter of the alphabet is called Z instead of Z. 5, top 5, the top 5 reason why you know you're a writer. The website you created that you think is pretty good is actually pretty crappy. That means you're a writer. Number 4, people assume you know how to spell every word in the Oxford Dictionary. It happened in the car on the way here, honestly. And in keeping with the Oxford theme, okay, only the writers will get this. In your mind, you debate the pros and cons of the Oxford comma.
Yes.
Number two, you die a little death every time you spot a typo. Number one, top reason that you know you're a writer. You judge a book not by its cover, but by how it smells. There we go, top 10, folks. All right, hiding scars. Well, okay, first, before we get into that, I have some thank yous here. Once again, thank you for all of you for coming here. Look at this, standing room only. I can't believe it. It's wonderful. We have to thank McNally Robinson for hosting this event. It's a great bookstore. They support local writers, Canadian writers. It's really a literary hub for the city. So we have to be very thankful for this bookstore. There aren't very many like this in Canada. Of course, I have to thank my publisher, Sans Press. They're a small publisher out of Brockville, Ontario. They had the confidence to support me on my work, and so I am very thankful for that. And I'm very fortunate too. I know the long hard odds it is to get published. If I wanted to, I could have done the self-publishing thing, but that's not the route I wanted to take, so I am thankful for them for taking a chance on me. I have to thank my colleagues. I have a writing group. We call ourselves the Cattywampuses. They're around over there. There they are. Bob Armstrong, Sue Sorensen, Byron Rempel, Buckholder, Josiah Dofeld, Brenda Sawatsky, and even Linda. She's here too. Thank you for helping me with my writing, and it was just a great experience to be able to throw ideas off of each other, and I honestly look forward to our meeting. And we actually have another meeting in 2 days, so it's wonderful. So and as I said before, they are all better writers than I am, so I'm very fortunate to be with them and to work with them. It's interesting, the way that this book came about. You know, you think you're toiling over a candle. This candle is dripping down, like in Phantom of Paradise or something like that, and you got the quill. No, it's all electronic, you're typing away, that sort of thing. And the way that I got this opportunity was through an online campaign through an outfit called DigiWriting, which is a book promotion company. They're based out of Toronto, I think, or somewhere in Ontario. And about twice a year, they have something called CanLit Pit, which I think stands for Canadian Literature Pitch Event. And it's a Twitter event, and like, what's Twitter? I've never been on Twitter before. Basically what you do is you have to pitch your story using 140 characters or less. And if there's a publisher that likes it, they give you one of these, you know, thumbs up. And that's basically an invitation for you to send a more formal pitch to them through the regular means. Well, that's what I did. Sans Press gave me one of those. I sent it in. They loved it, and here we are. So I'm thankful for them for putting that event on. Some people I need to thank, Bethany Gibson, my structural editor. She helped out with really tearing my novel apart. It was humongous. It was 250,000 words, and there was multiple points of view. It really needed a lot of work, and she put a lot of, she made me focus into the details and cut it down to the right size. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for all the different writers in residence programs that are out there that allowed me to interact with them and learn the trade even more. Ivan Coyote, Debbie Pedersen, Joan Thomas, all of them helped me in trying to make my craft better. Donna Bessel, she's here too. She was involved in a critique circle where a group of us would meet every month and basically critique our work, and that evolved into the Cattywampuses, and here we are. Jim Blanchard from the Manitoba Historical Society, he reviewed my manuscript for any inaccuracies. He made sure all the cell phones were removed from the work, so that's a good thing. I met with Danny Schur also. There's a large, the strike figures prominently in my novel, so why not meet with the expert on the Winnipeg General Strike? So I did that, so I'm thankful for him. Other people, Chris Adams, Jim Inglebertson, provided all sorts of advice and things that I need to watch out for when it comes to publishing, and I am thankful for that. My brother John, he printed all these fancy bookmarks I gave him the design, he printed them in one day. He's got a print shop. So if you need it, okay, here's the plug. If there's any printing needs you have, call MC Printing, they're in Archibald, and he'll just take care of it for you. He did a great job, and you'll see. People like Daryl with the photo, Jeff, Inga, Heather, they read an early version of the manuscript. Sean with video help, even Aaron over there. Some groups like Manitoba Writers Guild, Writers Collective, Prairie Fire, even friends at work helped out with the promotion of this event. I'd like to thank my kids for helping me, for pushing me basically, by saying, you know, Dad, when is this going to be done? And, so that's really great. The girls, they just celebrated a birthday just last week. They turned 14. So there we go. Yay. And not only that, but they had their track and field. How many ribbons did you guys win? Like a dozen? In every event, they got a ribbon basically. So isn't that wonderful? And the one person I really need to thank is my wife, June. Because without June, I would not have been able to complete this novel. There were a lot of dark times. There were a lot of times where I felt, you know, we're not going to be able to finish. I'm not going to be able to finish this. But she had confidence and she kept her resolve right from the start, right all the way through. And for that, I am thankful. Thank you, June. I love you. So there we go. Okay, right now what I'm going to do is read a passage from the novel. And then we'll have a little bit of question and answer. And then we'll get into the signing. How's that sound? Everybody cool? All right. I guess I could just pick anyone. Okay. I guess the thing about these readings, I've been to these before, and you don't want it to be too long, and you don't want it to be too short. And I guess for this particular novel, what I wanted to do was to make sure that I picked the passage that featured two of the main characters, which is Marco and Mildred. To be honest, there's a lot of passages, most of the chapters really, where there's just one of those characters present. And I also wanted to have something that's relatively near the beginning of the novel, but then I changed my mind and I have something near the middle.
Just read the ending.
I guess I could do that, then sales would be down, you see. That would be a good, you're supposed to be providing me with good advice, Jim. Just to give you a bit of background on this, I guess I've always been fascinated with Winnipeg history and with the Winnipeg General Strike and some of the events that surrounded it. And what fascinated me about that time period, this takes place between 1913 and 1919, is that there's a lot of stuff happened. Like when you think about a 7-year period, what's the biggest thing that happens to us? We stub our toe or something, the garden doesn't, there's things that happen, but maybe like one thing. Well, in the city during that time, in 1913 at least, there was a boom period, which followed by a recession. Then we went to the General War, the Great War, that went from 1914 to 1918. And then during that time, we had the influenza epidemic. We had prohibition. And then right at 1919, we had the general strike, which really captivated the entire nation because they were wondering, my God, is democracy going to fail here? What's going to happen? And to be honest, a lot of what happened with the strike even resonates today. So that was sort of the background behind that. And as far as the characters go, without giving too many things away, Jim, basically Marco is a Ukrainian immigrant who arrives in Winnipeg fleeing the old country. Something bad had happened in the old country. He's from Galicia, which was part of the Habsburg Empire, and he's of Ukrainian descent. So he comes to Winnipeg to start a new life, and he's really a jack of all trades. He could fix anything. Anything that's broken, he could fix it immediately. Mildred, she is the daughter of a rich industrialist. And Mildred Spencer, she sustained a horrible scar before the book even begins. And it fills her with a lot of self-doubt and apprehension. Because to be honest, in those days, gender equality, it's not great now, it was really bad then. And She was concerned she would never meet a husband or find love for that matter. And so she was filled with that sort of doubt. And so she ends up quitting her job as a school teacher and works at her father's shop. And that's where Marco and Mildred eventually meet. They develop a relationship, but it only goes so far because of some of their class differences. So in this particular chapter, which, as I said, is about halfway through the novel, it's called The Dance, and it takes place in July 1914. And the significance of this chapter is it actually happens to be the very first one I wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote, but it was the very first one that when I felt I had, okay, I could start writing now, this is the one that came out first. So I thought it's only fitting that it's the first one that I should read and share with everyone. And here it goes. It had to be one of the hottest days of the year. Even the inside of Mildred's elbows felt moist from perspiration. Far too unbearable for wool, especially on a Sunday, she wore a long white skirt made of cotton. Still, with the petticoat, she found it rather uncomfortable. Her predominantly white blouse had splashes of color in the form of roses, carnations, and other flowers embroidered in the material. With white stockings and shoes, the only exposed skin on Mildred was her hands and head. Through the front window, she noticed Marco walking up the drive carrying his books. She closed the curtains and quickly checked her appearance before opening the front door. Just about everyone is away today, she said. Mr. Spencer is off golfing with business partners. Mother is at the park with some ladies. My brother is away at the lake. The cook is downtown to stock the pantry and get a few other supplies. The other staff also have the day off. Gladys is the only one here, and she's upstairs mending some of her clothes. No one should interrupt us. Have a seat. Let me see the sentences you wrote in your workbook. Marco handed his notebook to Mildred and eased into the red velvet chair on the right. She sat on the couch nearest to Marco. She opened the notebook and examined Marco's most recent entries. The dirds fly south in the fall. Very good try. First off, you mixed up your B's and D's again. Next, the ER sound. Many sounds are spelled with an E and an R, but not all. For birds, it's actually IR. So confusing. Although the enormous curtains prevented the sun from entering the sitting room, it remained oppressively hot. Several times, Marco excused himself to dab his brow with his handkerchief. Occasionally, Mildred fanned herself with his notebook. After reviewing and correcting several of Marco's sentences, Mildred demonstrated the differences of several homophones, including two, and two, and there. She opened the textbook to a series of spelling lists and helped him read and recite each word on the list. Their warm hands occasionally touched. After about an hour, she assigned some homework to be completed for the next lesson. Mildred sighed and slumped back into the couch. That's enough for today, do you think? Marco nodded. They stared at each other briefly. The awkward moment lasted for several seconds. They stood up at the same time. Thank you for the lesson. I should be going. Oh, you are very welcome. All the hard work you do around the home is much appreciated. I know Mr. Spencer likes it. Marco grabbed his hat and motioned to pick up his books. Wait, Mildred stopped him. How rude of me. It's so hot and I never offered you any refreshment the entire time you were here. Please, let me get you a lemonade. No, I no need. I insist. Besides, I'm having a glass myself. She motioned for Marco to sit back down and left for the kitchen. She returned in 5 minutes with a silver tray holding 2 glasses of lemonade. Marco had moved to the corner of the room, running his hand over the gramophone. She sat the tray down on the table. My mother is with the Women's Musical Club, and when she hosts the occasional tea, they listen to classical music. Very good cabinetry, a nice model. She picked up both glasses and gave one to Marco, each with a wedge of lemon affixed to the rim. Marco guzzled his drink like a thirsty camel. Mildred winced slightly. She took small, tiny sips. Do you listen to any music? She gestured to the gramophone. No gramophone here. I had an old country. Oh, that's unfortunate. What type of music did you listen to? We have much folk music for dancing at weddings, birthdays, celebrations, some classical. Mildred's eyebrows rose. Oh, what type of classical? Marco closed one eye, training himself to recall. He counted off the composers on his right hand. Bach, Tarkovsky, Mendelssohn, Strauss. That's a very good group. I didn't realize you were familiar with with classical music, seeing as how you only work. Mildred stopped, catching herself. How could she belittle him, assuming that just because he was some laborer, he could not have any appreciation for fine music? She shook her head and grabbed his arm. I'm so sorry, Marco. I didn't mean to disrespect you. No very. Mildred took another small sip from her glass, still not even 1/4 empty. Marco seemed so honest and dependable, a pure and clean soul. Even his awkward foreign nature could not hide that. While his clothes were not the best fitting, nor in the latest fashion, his chiseled jaw and soft brown eyes, coupled with his natural good nature, at times made her pause. Come, let's see what there is. Mildred strolled to the gramophone and opened the bottom compartment, revealing a modest collection of records. She bit her bottom lip and bent down to take a few records and read the labels. Ah, here's my favorite, Mildred said. Blue Danube Waltz by Strauss. Strauss was from Austria, was he not? Let's have a listen. Mildred placed the record on the turntable and turned the unit on. A loud click, followed by a humming sound, came through a hidden speaker. The record spun. Mildred dropped the stylus. The first few bars of the intro to Blue Danube Waltz filled the sitting room. They looked at each other with little grins. Mildred took another small sip of lemonade and turned the volume up. The strains of the Viennese waltz dominated the room. I absolutely love dancing to this one. My mother showed me how to dance to this one. Really? Come, let us dance. Mildred held up her right hand, offering Marco to lead. William would take her places, but he never danced. No, Marco shook his hands. I'm no good. Please, I insist. He did not have time to debate the merits one way or the other. Once the telltale signature movement began, she grabbed his hand and put her arm around his left shoulder. From the angle of his arm and the appropriate distance he stood away from her, she could tell he had been trained. Marco squeezed her hand gently, placed his other hand on the middle of her damp, warm back, and began to dance. You are dancing a Viennese style, very impressive, Mildred said. The two twirled around the spacious sitting room, an ample size for the two of them not to bump into anything. Many men only know a simple box step. They do not realize this type of waltz requires more technique. My mother said, you must know how to dance. One day you will be asked. Women will appreciate. Their mother was correct. The pair twirled to the romantic melody pouring from the gramophone. When appropriate, Marco switched and they rotated the other direction. They switched directions several times. In each instance, Mildred followed his lead. No ordinary peasant, laborer from some poor, obscure Eastern European nation, this man could dance. The two sped up dancing, the faster moments of the piece and slowed during the tender passages. The heat of the room, the intense prolonged activity, and the uncertain emotions worked together to make the dancers perspire profusely. Rivulets of sweat poured down Marco's face. Drops of perspiration glistened on Mildred's brow and above her lip. Beads slowly rolled down from the top of her neck, straight down to the small of her back. She could feel sweat on her bosom. As the waltz neared its intense finale, they spun and circled at such a speed that the surroundings became a blur. The red velvet couch and chairs, the ornaments, all the furnishings, even the walls themselves, all became invisible to the dancers. No longer smiling, the two stared in each other's eyes. At last, the song ended. Mildred and Marco held their pose, their faces only a few inches from each other. They could feel each other's breath. Both listened, their hands clenched tight. For 10 long seconds, they stared at each other, stuck in a romantic no man's land, each waiting for the other to make a first move. Coming there to their senses, both released. Marco stared at the ground. Mildred backed off and cupped her mouth with her hand. Did something just about happen? I go now, Marco said quietly. He picked up his hat and books. Yes, Mildred said, still trying to catch her breath. Mildred shook her head. What was she thinking? What about William? Marco walked to the door and opened it. Halfway out the door, he stopped and looked back, but then continued on. She watched him walk quickly down the drive and vanish from view behind the trees near the street. She turned around to see Gladys standing with her arms crossed.
Awesome. Here.
All right, before we continue with the signing, is there any questions that anyone has? Hi.
In your introduction, in the little write-up I read about you, it says you like to do research. Tell us what that means. Like, everybody does research of one sort or another.
Well, research. The question was in my intro, I talked about that I do research and what kind of research do I do, because everyone does research. Well, basically, I'm a marketing researcher. That's my profession and my job. I've been doing it now for about 25 years, and usually that involves things like focus groups and surveys, and there's actually going to be a satisfaction survey at the end of this. So maybe just stick around. No, I'm saying. But that's my trade and profession. But a lot of times it also involves doing other kinds of research. So it just felt natural when I was researching this novel to sort of dip into that investigative, inquisitive mode, and it was actually a lot of fun. I got to go to, I guess there's the Manitoba archives and libraries, and I read numerous books. I even subscribed to the Winnipeg Free Press archives, which at the time was called the Manitoba Free Press during that time, and that's where you wouldn't believe how rich that material is. And I don't know, for the journalists that are in the crowd, these days you have like a little spot like this or something, and that's where you have to make your point. In those days, they would write pages and pages of infinite detail, and they did that every day, and every day there were people that set that type and ran everything manually, and I just can't believe how they did that. But no, to answer your question, yeah, that's what I do. Jim?
Richard, what kind of suggestions did Jim Blanchard have for the Manitoba Historical Society?
Well, one thing that he suggested when he read an earlier manuscript was that there's a wedding scene that takes place in my novel, and I don't know, not me, I figured, okay, a wedding, they're gonna hold, the Hotel Fort Garry was brand new, they're gonna hold it there. It's the swankiest, newest facility around, and that's where it will take place. So that's where I held this wedding. And he looked at that and he said, no, that's not how weddings were done back in the wartime era for the First World War. Basically, there were smaller, it's all been hallmarked these days, weddings. All the cake and this and that. Well, maybe they had cake in those days, but the special knife and whatever. Weddings in those days took place in the backyard of your parents' place, and it was a very intimate affair, and only some people, close friends, were invited. And right after the wedding, you went on the train and went on your honeymoon, and that was it. So I basically changed that chapter entirely, just to make sure that it was authentic. So that was one of the things that he suggested. Any other questions? Yes?
Sue and I were just talking about accents just before we started. I'm just wondering where that accent from Marco came from. Do you know someone that's...
Yeah, well, I guess that's my background, really. My parents are from Eastern Europe. They immigrated, I'm first generation Canadian. They immigrated from the former Yugoslavia. So I heard that all the time. And actually, my first language wasn't even English. It was Serbo-Croatian, which I have since forgotten. My jezik nije dobro. That basically means my language isn't good or something like that. And so once I get my first stroke, I'm sure I'll revert back to that. that's harking back to that. But I kind of hammed it up a bit for the writing. In the writing, I didn't put any emphasis, but I figured I'm here so I can ham it up a bit. So. Yes, Richard?
Did you have a vision for the story before you started sitting down and writing? Did you have it kind of percolated in your head, or did you just start writing and the story took on life as you go?
I had to. I'm more of a plot guy, and I had to set up the story that I wanted, and I had pages and pages of notes. And the way that I worked it is each scene. I sort of had, okay, here's all the scenes I want, and then I would number them. And then that would be the order of how it would appear in the book. Now, did I make changes? Yes. Once I discovered something new, it's like, you know what, I think I need to add a few scenes here. I had to adjust something because it's a better fit. Or, this just doesn't work anymore. And I chucked it away like I chucked out these cards. So there were a lot of changes along the way and adjustments that I had to make, but I can't. there's a lot that I wrote that I ended up chucking, to be honest. 100,000 words probably, but I'm generally more of a plot person. And Viv?
Well, this is a fiction book. Is there anything in it that's actually based on fact from your background?
The question is it's a fiction book, but is there anything based on fact? Yes, a lot of it, basically, it's historical fiction. So I work hard to be as authentic as possible to the timing and dates. All the dates that are depicted here is when that particular event may have occurred. So when it comes to the general strike, those dates are there. There are actually, I counted once, there are 29 characters that are actual live, real people that existed back in that era. Now it sounds like, oh my God, I'm not gonna read a book with 29 characters. No, there's only about 3 or 4 that are the main ones, and then others appear in cameos. So, for example, there is this, okay, if you're writing from 1913 to 1919, the big 50 or 500 pound gorilla is the Titanic. You have to have the Titanic scene in there somewhere, and I have that. So it turns out that there were some, I was at an exhibit, I don't know if you remember, but across the street from what is now Bell MTS Center, is that what it's called? There used to be MTS Exhibit Hall, and they had a couple exhibits before they tore it down, and now they have the Alt Hotel there, I believe. I went to the Titanic exhibit that was there because I thought, well, you know what, I should probably get some ideas, and look around. Well, it turns out there were some Winnipeggers that were on the Titanic and kind of didn't make it. They didn't make it back. So I incorporated them in a scene, in a very short one, but it's sort of my nod. And so you'll see, if you're astute enough, there are a lot of little Easter eggs in there that you should be able to pick out. The different characters. I got the Premier of Manitoba, obviously Mayor of Winnipeg at the time, and the biggest character of all that actually existed is John Kravchenko. He is a notorious criminal that was a bank robber, he was a confidence man, and he was the kind of guy that had this sort of cult of personality where if you just met him just briefly, you'd have this instant trust in what he says and would follow him. And that's how he was able to get these followers to just make him and have him do things. He was this incredible character. I can't believe that a movie has not been created about John Kravchenko yet. It will. But I thought, okay, I gotta use this guy. So he figures prominently in this novel as well. So yes, there are a lot of characters and people that are in this, and I tried to be as accurate as possible. Bob?
Richard, did you know that if enough people buy this book tonight, your book can figure quite prominently on the McNally Robinson Manitoba bestsellers list?
That's right.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint, hint. There we go.
I'll buy 2.
Okay, one more question, and then we'll get on with the signing. Yes.
As a writer, how do you do historical fiction? Because you have the love story between Marco and Mildred, and then you have to concentrate on the history. Like, how do you not get lost in the characters, or like, maybe I'm not explaining this very well, but you want to concentrate on the love story that's like, oh, I forgot about she's wearing the wrong outfit. Like, doesn't it trip you up? Like, doesn't it stop your flow?
I think what I try to do is concentrate more on the characters really, and everything else comes second. It's sort of the backdrop. And I want to make that backdrop as accurate as possible and depict it as accurately as possible. But I wanted to make sure that any of the interactions between the characters were true and real, because whether they take place in 1913 or 1923 or 1993, that's really what I think readers want, is something that comes from the heart. So that's what I work towards. Okay, sure. All right, I think maybe we'll get on with the signing now. And thank you everyone for coming here. I appreciate everyone coming. It's another reason I have to